welcome back to my channel. My name is Kat and I make videos about books, writing and every other random thing living rent-free in my neurodivergent brain. Today we have another tag. It's the this or that book tag about non-fiction related to people, and this was created by Ros and Elisabeth. I will link their channels in the description below. And I was tagged to do this by Ellen from the Ellen Made book club. This is normally a tag for people April, but I'm obviously extremely late. I was tagged at the end of the month of April and I went on vacation for a little while. So apologies if this is not April at all anymore, but that's the schedule that we have. So let's roll with it. So the first prompt is big, fat and detailed biographies or short and succinct ones. To be honest, my preference would be for something in the middle, but if I had to choose based on the actual things I've been reading, I would say probably the shorter ones. I've recently started picking up kind of graphic biographies, so like a comic book or a graphic novel, but it's biographies. And yeah, I've been picking those up from the library and really enjoyed them. The format makes them very quick and easy to read and digest. The thing is, like, they usually focus on a smaller part of a person's life, or then it's very kind of high level. You don't go much into details. So I think there are, again, like pros and cons. Like the pro is that it's very quick and easy to read. The con is that it's a bit light. It's a very good starting point to start learning about someone's life, and then if you enjoy what you've read, then you can look for something that goes a little bit more into details and provides a bit more depth. The second prompt is about celebrity memoirs or average Joe memoirs. For me, it depends on the topic of the memoir and the celebrity that we're talking about. I would honestly read from both. I don't read that many from celebrities, to be honest. Singers, actors or athletes. Like, I haven't read the Matthew Perry one or the Britney Spears one or things like that. It's not really what I gravitate toward. One that I've read was The Audacity by Catherine Ryan, who is like a Canadian stand-up comedian who emigrated to the UK. And the reason I read it is because I enjoyed her Netflix specials, I listened to her podcast, so I'm already kind of familiar with what she has to say. I find her funny, so I listened to her memoir on audiobook. So that one was pretty much an exception. Otherwise, I would rather read about writers or painters and usually like people from the past. I guess in this case it's more often biographies than memoirs, although if they've written something themselves, like if it's an autobiography, then I would be more keen to read that. And then when it comes to average Joe's memoirs, then it very depends on the topic. I'm very happy to pick up a memoir by someone I don't know anything about if the topic interests me. For example, Grounding by Lula Lander, about her relationship with her garden. That's something I really enjoyed. One of my favorite memoirs is Dreaming in Hindi by Catherine Russell Rich, and it's the story of how she left everything to go spend 1 year in India and learn Hindi. So yeah, in summary, for average Joe memoirs, I'm very keen to read them. It really depends on the topic. The third prompt is about complete correspondence or selected letters. I don't really read that much correspondence, if any at all, to be honest. But if I were to choose, I would rather have the whole thing, and like I would want to see the replies, like the letters from both people. Oftentimes you just get the letter from one person, and I find that very frustrating because it feels like I'm missing half of the conversation, and I'm literally missing half of the conversation. It feels like if you had a novel that's double POV and you only end up having just one character's perspective and you're missing the other one. That I find that very frustrating. I remember working for a publishing house and there were books lying around everywhere and you were allowed to pick them up because they were there for just like people to enjoy them. And during my time working there, I found one book that was the collection of letters from Jean-Paul Sartre to Simone de Beauvoir. And later on, I managed to get my hands on the other book, which were like the collection of letters from Simone de Beauvoir to Jean-Paul Sartre. So now I have both, and in my head, I'm still thinking that one day I will be reading both books in parallel so that I have the full conversation between them. I'm still to do that. I don't know if that will really happen, but yeah, that would be my approach. Like, I would want to read the whole thing. I believe that, for example, for Rilke's Letter to a Young Poet, there is one edition that has the full thing, like also the letters from the person he was writing to. And if I were to read that book, that's the edition I would like to get. The fourth prompt is about memoirs written when the events are fresh or memoirs written with hindsight. Personally, I think you need some hindsight to be able to extract the lessons from events and gain perspective, so I would lean toward written with hindsight. At the same time, you see very often, like when there is a big political or historical event happening, that publishers will push out a lot of books on that topic. And I've always been kind of questioning that, feeling a bit, I don't know, skeptical about it, because again, I feel like, oh, things are so fresh, how are you able to already publish a book like 3 months later or 6 months later, knowing how long the editing and publishing process is, like what is going to be the quality of the book. If it's something unexpected that happened, so for example, when 9/11 happened, a lot of books were published fairly quickly after that. That's when I'm a bit skeptical, because it doesn't feel like there is that much reflection and hindsight. But if it's something that you know is going to happen, like a new election or something like that, like it's something you can anticipate, and so I guess you can put in the work and already prepare for the outcome. Or just like, yeah, if it's a big historical anniversary, you also happen to have often like books coming out. In this case, it's going to be informed by kind of looking back and having that hindsight and having learned the lesson with time. So I'm feeling more comfortable with that, and I think it's also very useful to help sometimes get an understanding of the things happening in our lives and making sense of what's going on. Number 5, gossipy biographies or scholarly ones. Again, I think it depends on what I'm up for reading at the time. If I'm looking for entertainment, then I would be happy with the gossipy one. But if my goal is to deeply understand a historical figure and their work or the context in which they lived in, then I would want the scholarly one. And I think there are like fringe cases, like Marilyn Monroe, whom I'm very fascinated by. In this case, I would like both. I would be happy with like the scholarly parts, like all of the details, like verified history, and then the gossipy ones, like the theories and all of that. I think that would be fun, and having something that can mesh the two would be very cool. Prompt number 6, Diaries of Ordinary Life or Diaries of Extraordinary Events. Again, I think it's probably going to be my answer to almost, if not all, those prompts, but it depends. To be honest, I feel like all memoirs in some way are about extraordinary events. Like if you take the word extraordinary, it just means something that's out of the ordinary, like out of your, I guess, day to day. And so we don't really write memoirs or read memoirs about just like the undisrupted routines and flow of our days. Like we write about something that happened and disrupt things, and that can be at different scales. If I think of Grounding by Lula Lander, which is about facing the risk of losing her home a few weeks after losing her mum, those are events that all of us could face. Like losing a parent is something that very likely we're all gonna have to face. And the risk of losing a home that we don't own is also something that a lot of us can be exposed to. So it can feel like mundane things, but for that person, it was a big deal. It was extraordinary in that sense of just like out of the ordinary. It's like very disruptive. And so that's why I don't think they're really I guess like the prompt is about, oh, is it like the life of someone, like again, the life of an average Joe, or is it something that's like, whoa, only that person did that in the world, like, oh, I don't know, they went to the moon or something. I guess that's what the prompt is about, but I kind of, the phrasing, I'm kind of picking it up apart a little bit, because I think, again, all stories are going to be about something in some way that's extraordinary. Just the scale is different. In terms of my preference, I don't really have any. I'm happy with both. I'm curious to read about just like someone's life, again, if the topic interests me. And I'm also interested in the extraordinary things that very few people have done in their lives, like Pink Boots and a Mashed Tea by Miriam Meyer, who is like a National Geographic host, and she went on crazy expeditions, she discovered a new species and all of that. Like, not everybody gets to do that, and yeah, she's very cool. So happy to read from the whole spectrum. Prompt number 7, artsy memoirs or sporty memoirs? Instinctively, I would say probably more artsy ones, but I have read at least one sporty memoir before, which was from Rich Roll, which is an ultra marathoner who has a cool podcast that I was listening to at the time. And yeah, at the same time, I feel like, oh, I would likely not read a biography by a footballer, but I did watch the Beckham documentary on Netflix, so I don't know, I don't think there's really any logic to it. I can't seem to even be able to predict my own interests, so there we go. Number 8, gritty autobiographical writing or inspirational? To be honest, I'm not entirely sure I see the difference or understand what the difference would be. I feel like most memoirs are about overcoming some kind of obstacle or difficulty or adversity. I think that's why they're inspiring, because we want to see how those people overcame those obstacles. So I think the gritty and inspirational would go hand in hand. If it was a book about someone who claims to be amazing and succeed about everything that they do and went from success to success, I don't think that would be very inspirational or even very relatable. So again, I think the gritty part goes with the inspirational one. I guess it could be gritty in the sense of just like, if it's just a sad story, just like all is bad and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. But yeah, I'm not sure I would want to read that. So probably the inspirational one then. Number 9, biographies of historical figures or biographies of contemporary ones? I think if it's a biography, I would probably lean towards historical. But again, there might be exception. Like, I would prefer to read from the person directly if there is something. But if it's a person that I'm very interested in, want to learn more about their work, their context, all of that, and they haven't released a memoir, then the next best thing would be a biography, and so I would pick that up. Number 10, memoirs of happy days or memoirs of tragic days? Are there even memoirs of happy days without the tragic ones? I mean, there is this quote from Anna Karenina: all happy families are the same, all unhappy families are different in their own way. Like, it's not the exact wording, but basically it gives this idea of just, and that's why we want to read about the unhappy families, because they're the more interesting ones. And again, it can be sad and tragic at different scales, in different ways, even small ways. You can have an amazing book about someone who lost their beloved pet, and on the end of the spectrum you can have a memoir from someone who had to escape war and dictatorship. Like, the scale is very different. It doesn't make any of the books less interesting. So yeah, I mean, I would be curious to read memoirs about happy days only, but I'm very skeptical that they exist, and I'm wondering how to make that interesting. That would be a fun challenge actually, to have like just a happy story and make it interesting and gripping. So if you know of any book of that kind, please let me know. I'd be very curious to check it out. And there was a bonus prompt about Samuel Pepys, but I have no idea who that is, so I'm just gonna skip it. And I'm also not gonna tag anyone on this one because again, I'm already very late. But if you want to do this tag, I'm very curious to hear your answers, so please go ahead. You don't need to be tagged to do it. It's all free and available for you to do it. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.